The things that, and this gets into 2026, the things that people are going to experience are going to be nothing short of very bizarre, mystical, magical, confusing, you name it, because again, you are becoming the person that you have always been, or the being that you've always been.
I wanted to ask you, what are the implications of whether someone chooses whether to be an initiate of this new way for humanity, of the new world and the new earth?
One is here to evolve into 5 and 6D. The other one's here to guide that evolution.
What would you say to those people that are already in that initiatory path and are having huge levels of remembrances, how that might be related to the transition?
We will understand at a 3-dimensional level how the body functions with just a two-strand system.
Hello, family. I know that this time can feel like a very strange in-between, like we're holding the weight of everything that we lived in 2025, while also sensing the pulse of the energies that are coming in for 2026. And I wanted to share for a minute about something that we've never done before. And it's a pivotal part about what we want to see for the new earth, both co-leadership and community convergence. Our beloved multiple-time podcast guest, Kelly Kalatny, Channel for the Angel Raphael, and I are coming together for something truly historic and powerful. During this last month of the year, we're going to journey into a 3-week light code featuring powerful Mary Magdalene frequencies. Our planet is currently seeing a surge in the embodiment of the divine feminine codes. And there's yet a need to find a balance with our masculine Christ consciousness energies. And you are invited to come together with us to truly end this year in a special way. As part of this special offering, you'll be invited into 2 live virtual recorded events, one on 12/12 and the other on the winter solstice that Kelly and I will be hosting alongside special guests. You will be provided with countless hours of transmissions and channelings that activate the union of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Also, we are offering full access to 2 months of the Deep Dive membership. That means weekly circles, our whole library of exclusive Monroe Institute meditations, and a chance to connect with your soul family. But beyond what's included, this is a container of shared integration. This is about birthing the new human, restoring the original codes of divine union, and gathering as 2 tribes during key celestial portals, while also navigating together the frequencies of the incoming 3-eye atlas. And finally, we'll end the year together like we've never done before. You can head over now to the link in description or scan the QR code on screen and be part of this historic convergence. We will intentionally begin on the full moon December 4th, and I can't wait to see you all there. Much love. Franco Romero, welcome.
Hi.
On Just Tap In. You know, this beginning of this podcast has me feeling some type of way emotionally. I know you've said before that we will see more changes in the next year than we've ever experienced in the lifetime of 10,000 years of humanity.
Yes.
And right before we got on this call, you were telling me that this is most likely your last interview for the foreseeable future, for a very long time. And
Yes.
So I want to honor the moment. I want to honor this space that we have together, and for you choosing this platform and this space with me to do this with. I wanted just to start off asking, why are we entering a period of humanity that we've never experienced before, and how you've witnessed that is accelerating, what signs you've picked up on that are also forcing you as an individual to take a step back from this world into sort of a new chapter in your life?
Yeah. You went right into that, didn't you? So listen, first of all, always a pleasure to be here. We've established such a wonderful friendship. throughout this whole time, and so that has meant a lot. And so the fact that, as you pointed out, and I had pointed out before I got on, this is my last interview for a very long time, for at least as far as I can tell. Okay, and that doesn't really seem to be changing at all. So it's going to be a while. So here's the thing, Emilio. I've always come in and I've always given a very objective and a very inspiring, I like to believe, message about where things are at and where they're going. And this isn't going to be that different. So I want people to know that. But since I really do feel the calling, if you will, to move into a different aspect of what I came here to do, it was only fitting that I would do it with you, okay? Because we're brothers from different mothers. I actually was going to wear the beanie thing too, and then I didn't, so I should have. But B, I feel that you have always had a very profound, not that others haven't, but a really profound desire to not only spread the message that others are bringing to the table, but also use it in a way that would give you your own sort of personal purpose to do it as well. And that's going to be huge going forward. So I've been talking about this for the last couple of years since I've known you, that we're going through, and I'm going to do this a little bit more often than I would have in the past. But there are going to be some people, as you probably know, that are going to listen to this and go, yeah. I heard this before. Maybe you have. And maybe even I was part of that noise too. But there is a clear feeling that I'm getting. It's not even a feeling. It's all the transmissions that I get through the channeling that I do, which lately has been quite a bit. The personal experiences that I've gone through, which I've talked, offline, I've talked to you about all the mystical stuff that has happened in my life in the last couple of years. But there's also just clear trends out there. We'll call them 3D trends that are clearly showing themselves to be part of the narrative that a lot of other people, not just me, have been talking about. And that is that whether or not people want to accept it, whether or not they're poo-pooing it, whether or not they've heard it before 20 years ago by other people, we're at the end. We're really at the end. And historically speaking, you mentioned the 10,000 years. It's actually a little bit, it's more of a 12,000 year cycle, but we've heard about this, various cycles that the planet is going through. And there's a lot of science behind it. There's geological science behind it. There's historical, references to a lot of things, metaphysical stuff, spiritual references. But every indication, astrologically and like I said, in science and whatnot, there's every indication is that we're going through a cycle that is ending. And in astrology, there are a couple of cycles that are ending right now in the next 6 months. They started at the beginning of this year. Planetary cycles about how, and I'm not a big astrology guy, and I've mentioned this in the past. I don't know all the houses and all that, and all the various languages around it, but I do know this, that the cycle that we're in right now is one that either it has only occurred every 12,000 years, which is a very, very consistent cycle with the way the Earth actually evolves from an ecological standpoint. Okay, meaning that every 12,000 years or so, there's usually some sort of a catastrophic event that basically changes everything. Okay. And people can look that kind of stuff up. Okay. But astrologically speaking, there's also calendars and cycles, that are also coming to an end. But what's different, and you probably have talked to some of the astrologers in your interviews, that these are not just your ordinary cycles. These are cycles that are flipping zodiac signs and changing everything that we know that the astrological cycles have taught us are completely being turned upside down, or in what I would like to say, right side up. Okay. But if you go out east, many yogis and gurus, and even further out east, to like Southeast Asia and in Japan and places of that nature, they're talking about their own cycles, their own calendar periods that are also ending at this precise time. And so you have that. Now, I will tell you that you also have, for those people get a little sensitive to this, there's also a cycle within our own sort of Christian, upbringing, for those who were raised in sort of that, in that way. Okay, there are enough things happening now that would indicate that we are at sort of the apocalyptic ending to humanity's story, except it isn't quite as apocalyptic as it kind of gets blown out of proportion. You were just in Peru. You go into the indigenous areas of Central, South, and North America, and they have their own stories about cycles there too, and signs of their own various signs. Like here, like the Hopi here have had prophecies about this time period, all the way down to the even specific nature of some of the people that would actually be in this period of time. Like, for instance, there is a Hopi, I believe it's a Hopi prophecy about about the end times, if you will, being about connected to some individual that has a red hat. The red hat, if you know what I'm implying, is a very significant piece to the story. And right now there is one person in this world who tends to wear a red hat a lot, and has been very influential in the way that the whole infrastructure of this 3D world has been fluctuating. There's North American traditions or prophecies about the white buffalo, and how when the white buffalo would actually be born, that there would be a prophetic time where we're hitting this sort of end period. Everything is pointing to that. Everything is pointing to that. Not to mention the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have had all sorts of channeling, prophetic ones and whatnot, that have said that this is the time, and all the various mystics like Edgar Cayce and others who have said the same thing. This is it. And sometimes when you hear it once, twice, 3 times, 5 times, you tend to kind of brush it off. But there are way too many clear indications that everything is ending. And I've mentioned this one before, but one of the biggest things that becomes very crystal clear at this time period is the shattering of the linear timeline. And I would venture to guess that 9 out of 10 people that you would either interview in your shows or that just you hang out with would tell you that time is not acting in the manner that it would normally have acted in the past. It's going too fast. And that says a lot, because in the past, time has always kind of had this tendency of going fast, but it's either going too fast or it's so blurry you can't really tell at times what day of the week it is. And so you have this, and this has been talked about by various people, including myself, that this is one of the indications that when you're getting into 4D consciousness, when you're getting into the field of 4D, okay, there's a lot of, unfortunately, not enough time to cover all of this, but there's an misunderstanding that people have about what happens when we get into 4D and 5D, and how somehow, some way it miraculously changes everything in our lives. And so it has the tendency, it can do that. It won't do that unless you meet it there. Okay. And this is where I feel that if there's anywhere that I have really seen a lot of that evolution in humanity and if I may say in the you, is that you are now receiving that at that level now, as opposed to just kind of kicking back and, looking at your watch and saying, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? You're now intentionally becoming the beacon for that energy to come in. And when you start talking about it that way in esoteric terms, it sounds so like woo-ish a little bit, but we don't understand the pure science behind what we're doing in the field to know that we're really becoming transmitters. And so once we're transmitting those higher levels of frequency, in this particular case, fourth dimensional frequencies, which most people have no clue as to what 4D really is, because they just have focused on 5D, but you can't get to 5D unless you go through 4D. And I've mentioned that early on. And 4D is this awareness that you have. And you and I, again, have talked about this off camera. And I know that you're doing a lot of things as well in helping people to understand that there's a level of awareness involved here in order for you to see the things that are coming into view, because those things already exist. They're just not at a frequency you can experience right now. But the time linearity is a big one. Time is not acting the way that it should or has been in the past. Days are feeling like weeks and months, and weeks and months are feeling like days, and they're happening at the same time. And when you have that kind of distortion in the field, that's a clear indication that you're going into fourth dimensional awareness, because that has to do with space and time. And space is the only thing that exists. Okay. Time does not exist in the higher levels of dimensions. And so the further you go up, the more that time starts to wave in its fluctuation, because it doesn't exist really. So what you're left with is a lot of space. And this is something that I feel undeniably most people can attest to, the fact that it's feeling very, very stupidly weird when it comes to that experience. But there are other things. The Mandela effect is, which people don't talk about. It's not the sexy term anymore as it used to be years ago. But that's going to go through the ceiling in terms of all the variations of a certain event that may have happened that you swear happened, but didn't happen, at least not according to the people around you.
Have you experienced some before? Mandela effects?
Dozens of them. I have seen, there are more than I can come up with right now. And of course, as I'm sitting here saying, yeah, there's been a lot, but I'll give you one that just happened just recently. I was walking around. I live by a series of lakes, and not too long ago, I was actually riding my bike. I'm a pretty avid cyclist, and there was a bridge that apparently has been there since I can remember, and I've lived there 25, 30 years. I've used that bridge many, many times to get to a certain part of the neighborhood to get out of the lakes. One day it was gone. It was gone, but everybody in the neighborhood swears it was never there to begin with. And that's just one tiny example. And because most of the time when you feel into the Mandela effect, you're looking at it from a broader, the big earth-changing events. But the Mandela effect properties are actually happening more at the micro level now, where you swear something happened. Or on the flip side, you can't remember something to save your life. Okay. And most people would say, well, you got some cognitive issues that are happening. You're getting up there in age. I'm not talking about me, but I'm saying that but it has happened to me where I can't for the life of me remember something that I should have and always had a sense of remembrance around, but it's not coming through. I've talked to a number of people, a lot of the students and stuff that I teach, are having the same symptoms. They're forgetting, but it's not like forgetting. It's like it never happened. And yet people are saying that it did. So of course, in 3D language, they'd be all getting diagnosed or looked at to in terms of some sort of cognitive impairment, but they're too young, and it's not coincidence. It can't be if it's happening to a large group of people. So the further you go up in your consciousness, the more you disconnect with the vibration of the being of consciousness that you once were when you were in 3D, which means that the stories of that individual life also start to fade out to some extent.
We're becoming a new person, essentially.
You're becoming a new person. And in fact, you're not becoming a new person. You're becoming who you've always been. You start to realize that, and this is exactly this is the exact phenomenon that people have when they die and have a near-death experience, that they disconnect from the body, and the body that they see there laying on the ground or whatever, they recognize it, but the stories behind that body, the consciousness that was in that body playing that narrative over and over to convince you that you are who you are, starts to fade out too. And you start to remember that you've always just been playing in an avatar suit that has a story programmed into it, which becomes yours. You adopt it. And so you're seeing a lot of that too. So the things that, and this gets into 2026, the things that people are going to experience are going to be nothing short of very bizarre, mystical, magical, confusing, you name it, because again, you are becoming the person that you have always been, or the being that you've always been. The illusion of you starts to fade away slowly but surely. And when it does leave a pretty impressionable mark on your consciousness. That's, your psyche, because you're going, what the hell's going on here? So you have to make a little bit of an adjustment there. But this is part of what's going to happen next year. It's already starting, but next year it's going to come into full swing, which is when all these astrological and all these cycles and events collide around spring or summer of next year. It's going to be one big waking up party, and it's going to leave a lot of people rather confused, to say the least. Confused and yet not, because it's not like they're going to walk into the situation and they're going, where am I? Who am I? They're going to realize, oh shit, excuse my French here. Oh, no, not my French. Huge. I actually had a French student, and he was like, no, don't do that. so
excuse my Hispanic.
Excuse my Hispanicness. Okay. Cause I can say that. I can say, excuse my Hispanicness. It can be a little bit hard on the delicate consciousness that is still pretending that it's part of the game. So that's huge. 4D is going to be huge in next year because of the remembrance piece that next year is going to be doing on people.
I was going to say there, then we wouldn't need to go through a near-death experience to have that realization of who we truly are, that expanded awareness of who we are. And in that connection there, I wanted to talk about this ancient coding, or this ancient intelligence that you and many others with your soul signature are helping bridge through right now into this experience, this game that we're part of, that will change the nature of what the game is. What is that ancient coding?
Well, I will be able to share it with you somewhat in a sort of 20,000 foot view, because for a number of reasons I wouldn't be able to do it in great detail right here, but it's really not that difficult to understand it, at least in its pure sense. The ancient codes, if you will, they have to do with the truth. Okay. And the truth can be a little bit of a tricky thing, because everybody seems to have their own version of the truth. At least every major religion would say that they have their version of the truth. but if you dig, and if you dig enough in just historically speaking, where a lot of, when you get beyond the stories, the parables, the mythology, all that, when you dig deep enough into that, you start to find that there's a consistent language, if you will. I wouldn't say language, but a consistent theme of a narrative that we have been excluded from understanding, and we've made it, and we've given permission for others to create that narrative for us, and so that by the time we get to a very young age, we already don't know what truth really is, at least the one that we know as consciousness, as spiritual beings. We have an interpretation of truth that has been extraordinarily distorted, and so the trick is, and the irony is that all of this has been somewhat already said in riddles and in clues, because if you look at the Far East and the Taoists, they will tell you that the truth is what Taoism is all about. Okay, in fact, Taoism is literally translated as the truth. In Christianity, early Christianity, it wasn't called Christianity. It was actually called the way, the truth. Okay, and in fact, Taoism is the way, the truth. Okay, and so we have overcomplicated things, and we have designed a perfectly an extraordinary game. I'm not kidding. I mean, I wish I could tell people this was a metaphor, but we have designed a game as intelligent beings that we are, that literally convinces us that we are not who we are, and then takes us on this extraordinary adventure to figure out who we are by taking us down so many different avenues. And a lot of those different avenues are actually kind of cool. They're really fun and mystical. I mean, you can go down the traditional routes, which are the religions, if you like to, but those are really highly distorted. Okay. But even if you went down your own path, there is so much mystery and mysticism around finding the truth. And so then we complicate it more by, like, say, people who start to receive transmissions, and or they've had a near-death experience, and they start filtering things. They start to filter things with their 3D lenses. And so what happens is that now all of a sudden you might have somebody who's talking about the truth around, the truths that are coming out of things like astrology, or the truths that are coming out of things like a Buddhist or a Taoist or some spiritual mystery school, or I already said astrology, but you name it. There's a whole bunch of different ways of looking at this, and some that have these really profound activations. They see sacred geometry, and they start seeing colors and patterns and formulas and all this stuff, and they're sitting there and they're trying to dissect it all as if somehow they're supposed to, and in actuality they're not. If you do try to dissect them, and you're able to do that, good for you, yay. But you're not really, all you're supposed to do is receive them, because you are, in and of yourself, you are a vessel of intelligence, an extraordinary vessel. It is like the science behind this vessel, let's call it the body, just to use the body, is so advanced. It is so advanced that the science does not exist here in this world. Okay. And you can start to appreciate that now, Emilio, because you can start looking at what AI is doing today, and it brings to life photos. Okay. And it brings to life people in a two-dimensional way. Okay. That look like they're real. But then the question is, what is real? Because this is not real. This is an advanced version of AI that has been created in the 9th dimension. Okay.
Can we get into more of that a little bit?
Yeah. What would you like to know? What would anybody want to like to
So when you talk about the ninth dimension, are we talking about there's an intelligence that decided to create this third dimensional realm or game or playground, however we want to call it, for what purposes in that sense?
Yeah. See, here's where we get into, we've never gone into this place, but this is the whole, world is a prison kind of a thing that some people like to talk about. And that, my friend, is absolutely false. Okay. Even my good friend Rumi, which maybe he was at some other lifetime, but my good friend Rumi talks about why do you stay in the prison that you've created yourself? Okay. The door is wide open. There's some famous Rumi saying about the prison that we create. Okay. There is no, okay, easy physics. And this is why I'm saying, so like, this, because we've talked about this. I was initiated into a level of awareness or consciousness that is very similar to many other teachers or masters that have walked the earth, but it's not exclusive to them. Many others have done this, but many of them in their lifetimes were killed too. So that kind of got a little bit washed out, but it's coming back. And that is that I teach what's called the way of the inner child. Okay. It's not the child. It's the way of the inner child. So the way is still there, the truth again. Okay. And so what does this have to do with your question? Give me a second, because I'm still trying to figure that out too. But no, just kidding. I really actually do know why it's connected. So my point in all of this is that there is no such thing as a being or beings that created this earth for any purpose that might have been designed for their own benefit. Let's just call it that. Okay. I'm getting into a little bit of the conspiracy stuff that people talk about, which we don't typically talk about on conversations like this, but they're out there. They're out there. You have to remember that pure physics tell you that this is physics 101 in 3D. You can't have the kind of dense energy that would be required to create sort of this kind of prison mentality in terms of like, maybe not like stuck in a prison, but like this craziness that we're experiencing in the world. Who in their right mind would do this, right? That can't exist, Emilio, in the higher levels of consciousness. Why? Because pure physics will tell you that the higher the vibration of a frequency, the lighter that frequency is, not denser. Okay. So by universal law, even in the 3D world, you can't have a race in the ninth dimension creating something that is so weirdly bizarre like this world for anything other than something that was intended to expand the consciousness of all conscious beings everywhere, which is everything. Okay. And so I've mentioned this way back a long time ago, but it's worth of explaining this because it's so important for people to try as much as they can to connect the dots, because this is a big sort of crossword puzzle or multi-dimensional puzzle or whatever. Everything has a connection. Everything, every story out there has a connection to what's happening now. The ninth dimension is that place where evolved beings ascend to when they are ready to start taking on let's call it the duties of creating worlds and universes. This is where you start to get the real chance to manifest, in a sense, create in a sense like what we would call here in 3D, God. Okay. This is the first crack that we get in the ninth dimension, is to do that. Okay. It is the graduate school of all of the levels. Okay. Beyond the ninth dimension, the 10th, 11th, 12th dimensions that are part of the higher self, they are more focused on taking that that experience and evolving it into what's called the source, which is another level of consciousness above higher self. Okay. I will leave it at that for now. Okay. But there are levels. They're not hierarchical levels. They're evolutionary levels of consciousness. Okay. And there's a difference because there's no one that is more superior than others in that space. Okay. They may have an evolutionary awareness of what is, but that doesn't mean that they have a superiority over them in terms of hierarchy. So what does this have to do with your question is that in the ninth dimension, when you are starting as an evolved being, when you can start to create worlds, okay, then you are ready to merge into what we would call a higher self. And not that you're not already emerged in the higher self, but now you get sort of front row tickets to being immersed in the higher self sort of frequencies and focusing on the integration of yourself into source. And so a lot of this sounds like blah, 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 right? But what I'm trying to get at is that those ninth dimensions, like the Arcturians and civilizations like them or beings like them, have a deep awareness and connection to what's going on here, because those are divine beings that in a sense have been assigned the job of creating worlds, games for the higher self to play in and experience that are created by the source. Okay. So the source wants the higher self to experience new experiences. So that's not going to tell higher self, hey, I'm going to do it this way. We're going to use the students of the ninth dimension to create worlds where you higher self, through the various aspects of yourself and I've talked about in the past, how we all kind of rise up into individual parts that become the sum. You get to experience all these wild games that you can not only experience but grow. And if you grow, then we all grow. And if we're lucky, we may actually create something brand new. And that becomes a new form of consciousness that everybody can take with them and play with. But here's the one condition. You got to make sure that you can manage it at the three-dimensional level, because if you can't manage it in the three-dimensional level, you ain't going to take it to the fourth, fifth, or sixth, or seventh, or eighth, or ninth, because a lot of screwiness could happen there. So you have to do it here. And so that's why this Earth School is so hugely important, because even though it's just a tiny little speck in the entire scheme of everything that exists, its ramifications are huge. What is felt or created in this Earth School is felt at every level of consciousness, at every level. It doesn't matter how small this game may look to us from a bigger picture of divinity. It's still really huge. And the ninth dimension is where the science and the technology, if you want to call it, and the intelligence come into play. And that is where we get into all these discussions of frequencies and stuff, and ancient coding and stuff like that. There are some cool places we'll have to talk about sometime that it's just spewing with ancient coding coming out of the cliffs of the mountains. God, what we would call figures of gods that literally come to life when you're in the frequency of their frequency in those mountains, which I've been fortunate enough to have had some experience with. And it's just, it is everything you could possibly imagine that would come out of a fantasy movie in Hollywood comes to life here. And so that was probably a lot more than you probably even needed to or wanted to know about the ninth dimension, but that's probably, a good overview.
I wouldn't have it any other way. I did want to ask you, because, there's a difference between being an initiate of this change, a way shower. A lot of us want to see a new world. Yes. Versus being a participant sort of behind the scenes of it. I wanted to ask you, what are the implications of whether someone chooses whether to be an initiate of this new way for humanity, of the new world and the new earth, versus being a participatory presence in it? And what is the main difference in that?
One is here to evolve into 5 and 6D. The other one's here to guide that evolution. Okay, so the initiate is the one that's here to guide that evolution, and that's a lot of the stuff that I've talked about in the past year or two about the timeline that I was specifically around this time of the year last year. I was talking about a 2027 timeline. Well, that has become much clearer to me in terms of what that means versus the 2032 timeline. And there is an answer to your question. In the let's call it the 2027 timeline that I was talking about last year, a lot of the initiates will come to know who they are, and those that don't and come to know who they are, and they will be there to help guide humanity through the last few stages of this ascension, because this isn't going to draw, I've been saying this all along, this is not going to draw out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You already can see how different this 3D world has become in less than a year from the explosion of what AI has done to the grid system and to the psyche, if you will, of the individual grid system of the planet. And we're just barely touching the surface. Okay. The initiate will either remember who they are completely, and start to form a pretty good sense of what their purpose here is. They will start to become very mystical in 3D language. Okay, their clairvoyant abilities will start to come online pretty quickly. They will, and when I mean by clairvoyant, a lot of telepathy will start to come into play. Okay, that's just one of the many things that they'll come online, and they will start. I feel like I could say this that you're sort of going through that phase right now. Okay, that you're starting to really feel into you are something more than what you thought you were. Okay, by that time, those who don't come to realize their purpose as initiates, many of those may still stick around, but there will be many who will leave. The 2027 is the year where what I thought was a mass ascension process is actually more guided to the initiate process, where those who have done what they felt like they were supposed to do, even if they didn't know what the heck they were doing, by just showing up, they did some things here to change the crystalline system of the planet. They will leave. They will leave. Will be their first real exit out of this game. Okay, they're not here to ascend. The 2026 next year is going to be when a sizable chunk of people will be remembering that it's time for them to participate in the ascension process, meaning that they came here to graduate. And they can't graduate. And I've been saying this for a while now. You can't sit on your Humpty Dumpty there and let the things go by. You can't. If you are an initiate or if you are a participant, you have to participate or be involved in some way, because you're not going to get brownie points just for showing up. You're not going to get brownie points for, oh man, I made it through this. I listened and I researched and studied this, and I made a conscious decision to become more spiritual. Okay, yay. So what are you going to do with it? Okay, because remember, the law of resonance says that nothing comes to you unless you are already in that state. A lot of people have this thing that just, waiting and waiting. We've talked about this, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. But then you're in a state of waiting. Your resonant frequency is only going to be in a state of waiting. You're never, this is law of attraction 101, but I'm telling you, you have to, as a participant, you have to prove to yourself that you are who you are, and wake up out of it and go through somewhat of a simpler cycle of what the initiate does. The initiate goes through a much deeper cycle of remembrance. They have devoted many years already in advance to trying to remember and being actively involved in trying to remember who they are, even if they don't have a clue as to why they were doing it. But in the year or two ahead, they will start to remember. And again, if I may use you as an example, you've come a long way from remembering that shit. I have to. I really feel compelled. I don't have to. I feel compelled to be part of the process rather than just observing it or reporting on it. And that's the difference between an initiate. An initiate will raise their vibration to levels that are nothing short of mystical. Nothing short of mystical. Miraculous healings, and like I said, telepathy, and all sorts of mystical experiences of that have to do with the grid system. You name it, it's going to start to come together. Sacred geometrical visions and mathematical downloads and all sorts of things that will occupy their world to the initiate. With the participant, not as much, because they're really just trying to graduate. They'll get some of it, but it would be enough if they just remembered who the hell they were. Okay. They're not really, this is grade school. In a sense, this is grade school level experiencing, even though it's like the baddest school in the whole multidimensional sense, it's still grade school level to the beings that are here now, initiating themselves to remembering. And that's the key. And that's where I was saying that the difference between like what we've been talking about with the inner child and stuff is that we're clearing a simple path to that. You know, it's the path that I'll tell you just personally saved my ass when I was going through years of being lost and being in depression and all sorts of things, only to find out that this was very similar to the initiation process that others have taken. And they got them through it, both non-masters and people that are just, you know, that we know about. I mean, this is not meant to be rocket science. And if I may have mentioned this to you, biblically speaking, there is a phrase but you'll see this in other passages, in other philosophies, in other religions. There's a phrase in the Bible, and again, I'm not a Bible guy, okay, but I mean, these are good phrases, these are clues, okay. It says the only way to the kingdom of heaven, and I may have told you this one already in the past, the kingdom of heaven referring to consciousness is through what?
The child.
Yeah. Thanks for making it simple, because I believe I asked you this question once and you gave me something so deep I literally almost couldn't sleep the next night for 2 or 3 nights, you know. So
I'm curious to know, what would you say to those people that are already in that initiatory path and are having huge levels of remembrances, how that might be related to the transition from the 2-strand DNA to the 24-strand DNA that we briefly touched on pre-recording, that I thought was super, super interesting to touch on.
So if I'm going to get to the last piece and then the first piece last, and the last piece first. That
just mind blew me what you just said.
No, dude. I told you that one time you said that answer. Literally, I almost blew off my chair here, and I was almost in a semi-state of coma for about 2-3 days, because it was like so.
I'll ask it again. Can pure love still exist in stillness?
Yeah. And yes, it can.
Anyway, I don't want to change the topic.
We're not going to go there.
We're not going to go there.
That one, literally, I went like that for a couple of days. So it's like, all right. So, the strand system, and this gets back to what I was I believe, I'm not sure if we were saying this before or after this interview, we have a genetic, a biological machine here. Okay. And you were asking me what's going to change over the next couple of years. And again, I keep saying this is coming, and it's not, and every day, every week, every month, every year, it's becoming more evident that it is coming. And that is that we will understand at a three-dimensional level how the body functions with just a two-strand system, okay? Which, as you probably already know, we only use about, I believe it's like 5% or some ridiculous amount of the two-strand system that we actually use. The rest of it is considered junk DNA, okay? There's nothing junk about that. That system is filled with codes, filled with a technology, a built-in technology based on the ninth dimension, that as frequencies keep rising, those codes will start to activate like popcorn kernels. And those codes will enable the body to do things that it's never been capable of doing before, which is to morph itself if it's physically ill, fix itself, so to speak. Okay, but beyond the two-strand system, when the 24-strand system, which we are now morphing into, and you go, well, I don't see any evidence of that. Well, there is actually some science that is starting to indicate that there is something happening with our two-strand system that seems to indicate that something interesting is occurring that might lead to the morphosis, if you will, or the genetic engineering of more than two strands. And I'm not going to try to bore people with this, but it shouldn't be boring, because when the other 22 strands come online, and they're there already, I have to stress that they're already, we just can't see them currently in the vibration we are at. But as we get higher, those strands will not only become clear, noticeably clear, but they will start to activate. And when that activation occurs, the body will become a vessel, a real pure, highly advanced vessel of technology and intelligence that will be able to do things that we have always thought we could only dream about, such as growing young and morphing into another body. I mean, if you wanted to be a man today and you wanted to be a woman tomorrow, you could be a woman tomorrow. It would take nothing for the body to morph itself into that, because it's made up of 50 trillion individual coding systems called cells that enable it to genetically realter its programming just through consciousness. Okay, but the technology of that comes from the other 22 strands that are still yet to be observed, but that is going to start becoming evident in the coming years. We will start to see signs of that, not the least of which was that the other 95% of our current DNA system, which is full of stupid coding as well, will also come online. So these things 5 years ago would have sounded like something out of some space odyssey movie in the year 2500 AD, but it's not anymore. It's becoming very clear that we're capable of doing and will be capable of doing things in the human sense, in the human body sense, that we weren't able to do before. And that's because of the activation of those ancient codes that are inside our bodies.
Mm. Why have they been dormant for so long?
Frequency. You can't, these are codes that are only ignited by frequency. Okay. Tesla said frequency, vibration, energy. Those are the three things in the universe. Whether you're talking about time-space traveling, whether you're talking about astral projecting, whether you're talking about multidimensional time traveling with aliens or whatever, everything has to do with those three things. Okay, we are not at a frequency yet, but we are fast approaching those levels this next year. The 4D levels of consciousness, which are associated with the divine, I'm going to go in different places here, divine feminine frequencies of awareness. Okay, they're not the only frequencies, but those are going to be huge frequencies that will enable us to start to see things that we couldn't see before. Okay, frequency. Tesla knew this a long time ago. Einstein knew it. All of those guys knew it. And not just frequency, vibration within the frequency and energy and how it plays out when it vibrates in a certain way. That you see enough of this in other sciences, how vibration can make patterns, crystalline patterns out of sand and things of that nature. These are universal clues that are being left behind to show us how frequency, vibration, and sound, if you will, that comes when the vibration, the frequency, and energy all interact with each other, and we're getting there. We're basically there. Okay, and let me rephrase that. We have always been there, Emilio. Okay, we've always been there, but we have finally, as a collective consciousness, have finally risen in the energy levels of this planet to see and experience what has always been there, but we just weren't able to see it until now. And when that happens, again, getting back to 2026, okay, when we start to remember and our vibrations start to rise exponentially, it becomes a domino effect. And the domino effect is that when those codes start to activate, you start to remember more. And what you start to remember, Emilio, is the plain and simple truth that this has always been an illusion, that this has always been a dream state, as I wrote in my book, okay, that you have never, ever really left. Okay, you've been playing like in some of these sci-fi movies. You've been playing like Inception. You've been playing with a machine or a vibrational contraption, a hologram that makes you believe that you have left and gone to some obscure remote place in one universe out of trillions and trillions and trillions of universes to play a game called Earth and life. And when that happens, it changes everything. The more that you start to remember, see, you don't remember just like going, oh man, I had this crazy dream or this crazy thing happened to me. It's like, damn, why does this feel like, okay, I know it sounds crazy, but why does it feel like I've done this before? Or why does it feel like I know, like this isn't crazy? Why does everything else feel like it's crazy, but I'm not feeling crazy, even though I should, because everybody tells me I should? That's a kind of remembrance where things start to remember. So like, this is what a lot of near-death experience people would tell you, is that they remember things, not just for the sake of remembering, but they remember them as if it was more clear to them that that was the truth and this was not. They come back saying, this is not the real deal. Where we were is, because this is not the real deal. Okay? This is a game. And in what we are seeing now, with just the primitive strides that we have made in I'm going to keep using AI, in AI, you're starting to see how AI can make things look stupidly real with this intelligence that we're playing with. Now imagine when you take it all the way up to the 9th level, okay, it starts to look like this, where we're actually physically in 3D rather than just 2D. And so that's the kind of remembrance that people are going to have starting. They're already having some of it in bits and pieces. I've talked to so many people that are having this, that up until a couple of years ago would have said, man, I can't talk about this with anybody because they'll think I'm nuts. It's depressing. I feel alone. I feel disconnected. But now they still feel a little bit alone and they still feel disconnected, but they're starting to realize, A, this stuff isn't going away. It's actually getting stronger. And B, other people are actually talking about it too. So there's got to be something about this that makes sense, because it makes sense to me, even though everybody else tells me that it's not. And I don't care what it is. It could be you're talking to aliens. Okay. You could be talking to aliens because you could have come here specifically. And I've told you about this before because we've talked about the angelic realm. The angelic realm is a very elite group of spiritual beings that are tasked to design these worlds. Okay. They give it to the 9th dimensional beings to create them and oversee them. Okay. So that everything goes off without a hitch. Okay. But at that level of 9th dimensional awareness, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can create. I mean, that's the whole purpose of being an angelic being. And many people, not everybody, maybe out of 100 people that are listening to this show, there probably is one that resonates with that frequency. And I'm not talking about archangels and the angels with wings and stuff, which, by the way, doesn't really exist. Okay. But they do look pretty cool, at least in drawings. Okay. Those are the beings that are here orchestrating the way that this thing will look. And it's up to the ninth dimensional beings to actually make it happen. So those kind of things are the things that I've had countless people over and over again say, why is it that you're telling me something that I know? It's because you are one of the initiators, or initiates. You're one of the initiates. Now, whether or not you choose to do it, I told you about this, whether or not you choose to get off your butt and do it is entirely up to you. Okay. You don't lose any points. You just go back home, kind of the angelic realm, and you get another assignment, which you're doing a million of these anyway. And you go on. But 99 out of 100 of those who are getting the hit, the calling, feeling this resonant energy that we're talking about, yeah, this sounds like I am an initiate. Okay. And that scares a lot of people too. I don't mean to get off on a tangent here, Emilio, but it scares a lot of people too, because when people hear initiate, they start getting into this, someone will get into this crazy idea of cults and things of that nature. This is not a cult. Okay. This is your calling, your divine calling. This is what is called an initiate. At the master level, a master initiate is the highest you can be at this level, where you're here and your calling is to really do something pretty seismic. But you don't have to be a master initiate, but you do have to accept that you are initiate, and it has nothing to do with being in a cult. That was a clever way in which the game designed itself so that you would get freaked out anytime that you would hear the word initiate. And you'd go, crap, this person's trying to start a cult. No, the only cult there is between you and you. That's it, because you're here to do what you're supposed to do. So that was my social commentary for the day. Thank you very much.
I've heard you say before that you know and understand how coding works in the stream of words in order to activate people. And I think what you were briefly mentioning there is that when you are saying putting these words together, it is an activation.
Yes.
And that's why many people feel the same way like I feel when I listen to you. And I want to go deeper into that concept of how you use these stream of words together to help other people remember, because many of us will feel called to do that in our individual life when we are communicating and using our voices as initiators of the change.
Yeah, and here's the irony of all that. And I will answer that question as best as I can. But what the irony is that you can't truly and that's beautiful that you feel the calling to do it, okay? But to be effectively doing it to the point of being able to activate others, kind of the way that you have said that I've been able to, like with you, I activate you, and I get a lot of that from other people, is that you have to come from a place of purity. And I'm not saying like purity, like, okay.
You don't have to be a virgin to do this.
Yeah, sorry. That's one of the rule number one. Virginity, you don't have it, sorry. Now listen, we're just joking around here, people, okay? That's the other thing that we have to make light of this, okay? And this actually gets to a little bit of what you're talking about. We have to realize that spirituality is meant to be playful. And you were telling me about what you did at a retreat that you were at in South America, and how you brought the frequency of playfulness into that environment, and how then people responded for subsequent days with that energy. It changes everything. In your own grid system. Your grid system is, I always like to mix and match a lot of things to help people who are playing around with different frequencies, and because there are many different ways to remember. So for a lot of people who are in the sacred schools, the mystery schools, Most of them are designed more towards divine femininity, but there's a fair number of them that are also addressing different frequencies, like masculinity and stuff. The nature of all this is to keep things simple. There's an expression here: keep it simple, smarty, or stupid. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep it playful. Okay, you got to keep it playful. Here again, don't take my word on it. There was at least one teacher, actually Buddha talked about this too, that says, children have a way of children have a way of translating frequency into something that is playful. Buddha said something to the effect that the nature of becoming a master is when we know how to interpret reality as a child, or something like that. Something along the lines of that, okay? If we get overly complicated with this stuff, we are falling into the trap of the game that you designed, okay? Meaning, if you feel that everything has to be resolved through complicated algorithms or sacred geometrical patterns or sacred astrology or whatever, or sacred schools, mystery schools, or rituals, sure, you'll be able to play with some of that energy. Sure, you'll be able to manipulate or change some of those frequencies. Sure, you will understand the science of spells and incantation and sorcery, okay? Sometimes you get a little bit too crazy with it and you get into black magic, okay? Gotta watch out for that one, okay? That would be that's possible, okay? So what's beautiful about this game, as you can see, is that it draws from every type of discipline, if you will, okay? I could speak about the language of the game in different ways. I can call it formulas, or I can call it codes, or I could simply just call it whatever. I can't even speak anymore. or you can talk about it in spells and incantations and in sorcery. It's all the same thing. The thing is that you must be intentional with what you're doing. That's what I mean by pure. You must be intentional. Okay. If somebody sits there and says, even the best natured people saying, and I am being a little bit critical about the people that dissuade others by saying, I've heard this all before. Okay. You just threw out a massive declaration into the field that keeps your world repeating itself over and over in a cyclical way that almost drives you mad, because you'll never get out of that. You'll continuously chase your tail. And I talk a lot about this in my book. You just continuously use your words as sorcery, as a sorcerer would. We don't realize we don't have to have these cool hats and wear these gowns or these robes to be a sorcerer or sorceress. We are our own sorcerer or sorceress. We are our own mystic, okay? We got to be careful what comes out of our mouths. And I will tell you that it doesn't even have to come out of our mouths. We have to be careful with what we're actually processing in the form of thoughts and emotions. If you don't do that, and you could be subtle, and I've told you this before, it could be stupidly subtle in terms of some of the playful words that you are using to define your perception of reality. And yet I tell you, because I've told you before, really, man, you gotta cool your jets on some of the words you're using, because you love to use a couple of certain words, right? You are laying out a system of codes that tells the field, oh, I guess he or she wants to keep doing it this way. That's how incredibly powerful. We feel like we have to raise our frequency to become mystics. No, we are mystics. We're just using an antiquated language system that keeps us stuck in this 3D loop, because that's the way that we chose to come into this game, is to not remember that we have a highly advanced awareness that allows us to get beyond the three-dimensional descriptions of this reality. We get out of the process of analyzing this reality and move into more experiential awareness of this reality. And that's where we get to be intentional mystics. Otherwise, we are just literally playing the same song over and over and over and over again. And we don't even know it. We're like that movie where the person is so powerful and they can't, and you keep telling them, you're a god, and they won't buy it. They won't buy it no matter how much you're selling it for cheap or for free. But this is what people are going to start to remember in 2026. That remembrance is going to be so pronounced. Why? Because the things that they are not, like the things that are happening in the three-dimensional world on the surface level, is starting to shove it down their throats. Okay, they're starting to see I told you that this year was the year of the reveal, and that things were going to get really dicey towards the end of this year. Okay, and I'm talking about 3D dicey, okay, like, where you look out and you see a really effed up world right now, where both the masculine and feminine are running cuckoo right now, okay? And I'm going to stress that the masculine and feminine are running cuckoo right now, okay? But because of the introduction of the feminine energies in the last couple of years and the massive infusion that's going to come in 2027, that's going to change. But right now, you're starting to see the revealing of who are the true Illuminati, the people we're always afraid of, were kind of dictating the world. It wasn't some group of mystical beings that were torturing us in our own prison. It was a bunch of billionaire people that are trying to keep control of what's left of the power structure of this game on the 3D level. Okay. And so you're seeing that distortion revealing itself now. And many other distortions of that have to do with those frequencies that are rising to the surface. Nothing is being held back now. And it doesn't taste or look good to us. And if nothing else, that's going to be shoved down our throats or hit between the eyes. And it's going to cause us, like in psychology, there's a method, I don't know if they still use it, but they shock you into remembering. That is what we're going through right now. Every single pattern, each one of these things that I talk about, 2024 was the reboot year. 2025 is the reveal. 2026 is the remembering. These are tethers. These are very sophisticated tethers that were put together that will pop at the end of each year. And each time one pops, and there's 9 of them, we're getting closer and closer and closer to the end. And they're basically popping on an annual basis towards the end of the year around the solstice period, which this year is not going to be any different. When it pops at this point, at the end of this year, things are going to get super nutty going into 2026 when we start to remember, when others start to remember. So I'm trying to connect the dots as much as I can so that you can kind of see how it all comes together. And this is all part of your answer about the language. When we start to remember that there is an entirely different language that we have to speak, but we have to speak it as if we're God. And if we can't accept that, then there's a little bit of remembering you're going to have to go through. Because that's what people realize when they die, is that they're basically God. So if you can't speak it from that perspective, if you can't, because you're just can't drum up the idea that you could actually be a God or God, then it's not going to land. It's not going to land. And the reason it's not going to land is because I've said this before many times. If you don't recognize who you are, if you cannot recognize who you are, then how in the hell is the field going to acknowledge who you are? The field will only acknowledge you when you acknowledge yourself. And until then, you'll just be whistling Dixie, do. I don't know what Dixie really is, but do. So
how are we connected innately to this field?
The field is in everything, and we're in everything. So there's this sense that the field is everywhere, but not necessarily here. Or that somehow it's something out there, but there isn't. Everything's connected. Everything. And you've heard it. I'm not the first to say that. I'm not the first to say it, but by goodness gracious, right? I'm trying to keep my language to PG or G. Okay. This makes sense, people. The field is everywhere. And if it's everywhere, and then which means that it's in us and around us and through us, then we are a node in the field. We are a node. We are a signal, a beacon, something that transmits and receives. There's no differentiation between us. And this isn't just between me and the source or the higher self. It's me and you. It's you and somebody else. It's why you say, oh man, there's this really cool song that I wanted to put on my playlist. And then the next morning you're at the gym and that song appears on your or not on your playlist, but appears out of nowhere, because it isn't a song that you would hear on your, America's Top 10 or anything.
This is a true story, by the way. This is something that happened to me at a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat. Yeah, well, I didn't want to go. I just was kind of keeping it on the up and up. I figured if you wanted to share that, but yeah, that's how you do it, because you're always connected to the field. Always. But the bottom line, Emilio, is that the field will not recognize you if you don't recognize yourself. So I'm sorry, you were saying something? Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, you did say that there are moments when the field recognizes you more than other times.
Yes.
And what is that dependent on?
Well, in most instances, people tend to do this when they're in a state of distress. And what I mean by that is, this is where you start to dabble with miracles. Okay. This is where you go deep into yourself, and you're in a moment, and this has happened so many times. I've been very fortunate with all the people that I have met and have taught and stuff, to see them doing this in real time, or have had them do it in the past. When you're in distress, you don't just get into a fight or flight mentality. That is not the only option you have. Okay. If you have any innate programming in you that's active, all right. In other words, if you came into this game with some coding already active for you to do this, because this was one of the ways that you were going to remember who you are, okay, then there is something besides fight or flight, okay? And that is this awareness that you step into that recognizes that you have the ability, as the one who created this game, to change the programming in real time. But to do that, you have to go deep within yourself. And this is where I say that a lot of people do this in moments of distress, where they have no other choice because they're really feeling like everything's collapsing in front of them. Oftentimes, this is like when people are dealing with life and death matters, when they've been basically told that they have only a few days to live or something like that, or a diagnosis of some kind of cancers, they're testing for that, and you've got 48 hours before the results come back to change your reality. And I have actually been involved in those scenarios, not myself personally, but in guiding students through those. And bam, they come back, results, bam, are gone. There's nothing there. Or the parent that saves their kid from lifting the car up because they're trapped under the car and they don't know how they did it. And science will say it's a big, huge adrenaline rush. Yeah, right. Okay. You have been able to dig deep inside of you, and something innately tells you that you can make one commandment, not request. Okay. And that is to scream out deep from within yourself the magic word, and that is no. Okay, as if you are telling the whole entire field, okay, I don't care for this narrative anymore. Change it now. And I talk about this in the book, because this is how my son was running across the street. It wasn't a street, it was kind of a road that all airports have when all this traffic is kind of going through and sifting through, and cars are, coming out of there at 35, 40 miles per hour. And he's bolting out. He's 2 years old. He bolts out into the street. He's got seconds to live because there's an onrush of cars that are just going to trample him. And I dug deep inside and I screamed the magic words, and I screamed them, no. And I instinctively knew that something had happened. I didn't have to know. Everything shut down. I talk about it in the book. Everything. The noise shut down. The airplane shut down. The traffic shut down. Air stopped. Everything stopped. The game literally stops. because it recognizes that commandment, but it's got to come from a real deep place, and you got to really, really command it, not tell it, please no, please no. Okay, because please no means that you're basically saying, please, pretty please, which you're going to talk about. I'm just putting a lot of emphasis on the please. No, you have to scream it as if innately you know that you can change it by that one commandment.
What about when we say yes from that place?
You could do it too. That yes is good. But you got to really come from the place where you are really liking it. Like you are God and you're really pleased with that outcome. You know, yes. Yeah. Okay. That's called desire. Okay. You're desiring something to happen again. Okay. Okay. That's easy. I mean, it's easy to say it. A lot of people are sitting there probably listening to this and going, yeah, but see, if you're doing that, you're already diluting the power that you just gave yourself. Not that you gave yourself, the power that you've always had. You tasted it and then you let it slip away. You know, it's kind of like that movie saying, you had love in your hands and you let it slip away. I'm not sure where that's from, but I remember that from somewhere. So in this case, you had this taste of what you are as a divine being. You told the field no. Not no, please no, please no. I'm begging you no, but no. I don't desire this. Change it now. And like I said, in the case of my son, I had to change it. I had to change it because I had 3 seconds to save his life. So.
Yeah. And if humanity on a collective level is commanding no around the agendas that we're seeing, the past paradigms, will we see an instantaneous Mandela effect?
Yes.
In that sense?
Yes. And it will be at different levels. It'll be at the level of your daily life, where you start to see and feel a connection with the field around you that you didn't have before. And you'll see it in results that come broadly in terms of the events around the world. There's an expression, and you know this because you've done some of this with your own stuff. Again, it's a kind of a biblical expression, so I'm going to kind of take some of the pieces out. When two or more are gathered, there shall I be. Okay. Now the biblical way of saying it is when two or more are gathered in my name, there shall I be, or something like that. Okay. But I took out in my name. Okay. And just said, when two or more are gathered, there shall I be. There shall I be, the being of the I. There's where I be as I become consciously aware of myself as divine, as God. It's right in the words. It's literally shouting out, but we don't see it. And that's why people come together in groups of more than two or more. But they do it in a different fashion. If it's in a religious way, then, it still helps. It still works in some cases. But it's not as powerful as if groups of people came together knowing that they are initiates, knowing that they are light bearers, because the vast majority of the people that are listening to this program are light bearers, are initiates. They just don't know it. But only a few of them will actually hear it enough for them to at least remember something that's being said in this conversation, to act upon it. Okay, at least for now. But the others may be seated for later on down the road, or they may not remember at all. It's entirely how the game plays out. Okay, but that coding is there, and that's why we talk like this. That's why we're talking like this. That's why you ask your questions the way you ask, and that's why I respond the way that I respond. It's because we know in some way that we're not even quite aware of that we're activating people. And they're feeling a calling, a drawing. They get drawn to you, they get drawn to me, they get drawn to something, but they get drawn and they remember just enough to do something about it. But the thing is, this is going to happen more often, and this is crunch time, and this is when there is. I mean, this is it. I mean, do I have to spell it out? Look at what's happening in the 3D world. Okay. Everything is hemorrhaging out because all of this energy is pushing all of that out. Okay. And so this is like, all right, performance has been going on here. Initiates, stage left, get in there and start doing your thing. Start becoming that which you already are. We're not here to die. I've told you this many times. We're not here to die to remember this. That's too easy. And besides, if you do die, then you're out of the game. And so, wah, 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 you don't get to come back. Okay. Not anymore, because this is it. A lot of people who are feeling the calling can say that somewhere in their life, they have always been drawn to the idea that that there's a home. They don't know what it is. They're not sure why they know this place called home, but they also know deep down inside that they're here not just to fulfill a purpose, but that they're only here one last time. There are a lot of people that say, I know I've known this all my life, that this is the last time I'm here. And the reason is because this is it. There is no more after this. There is no more after this. Not in 3D. There's 4D, 5D, and beyond, but not this.
One of the last things I would love to explore with you for a minute is you've spoken about these tethers that connect 3D to 5D together, and how every year at certain moments in time, and in linear time, like the solstice, for example, these tethers start disconnecting more and more. And when they finally snap, I wanted to ask you, what happens to our memory, our identity, our ego self? Yeah. Joe Dispenza calls it the character in the virtual reality game. But even
I like that.
Even going more into that, because there is a specific question there. You brought up the solstice tether that will be snapped.
Yes.
What can we expect when that comes, in the ramifications of that?
So there are likely a lot of smaller tethers, but there are 9 that are massive tethers. They're holding the 3rd and the 5th dimensional worlds together. Okay, and they're holding them through these sort of frequency portal arrangements that are held primarily through 4th dimensional frequencies of awareness. Okay, so you can imagine that the more you remember, the more you're climbing through these portals out of these tethers into 5D. When the last one snaps, which would be in 2032, then you will get what most people are describing as the 3 days of darkness. Okay. There are so many people that are saying that the 3 days of darkness are tomorrow, the next day, or the next day. That may be somewhat true to the individual who is ascending at a much faster rate than the group. They will see their own tethers breaking off of the game, and they might very well see flashes. Okay. But the grander one, the big one that everybody talks about, is the last tether. And the last tether is equivalent to when you split 2 atoms, like with physics and the atomic and hydrogen bombs and stuff. When you split those, and these, I believe I've talked about this before, but those are at the end of the periodic table of elements. When you split them, they create a massive explosion of energy that is viewed very simply as a flash of light. Okay. And what it does is it's kind of like it's like a Polaroid, if people are old enough to know this, but like a Polaroid, maybe, like I know that there are still some cameras out there, and you take a flash and if it blinds you for a moment, just for a moment, and then without even knowing explanation, you sort of wake up into a reality that, linearly speaking, would be equivalent to have been gone for 3 days. And that would typically mean that you come back and this reality is not the same anymore. You've ascended into 5D. Okay. And so you're kind of checked out of this reality. That will happen in mass at the end of that tether period, but it will be, as each tether pops, there could be individuals or small groups of people that will see those kind of flashes and ascend out of here. This kind of stuff will start to become very, very clear as from this point forward now that will happen. As far as what happens as you're evolving from an energetic standpoint is that the more you raise your consciousness, the more you start disconnecting, not just with the world around you, but with the individual consciousness or program that governed who you were in this reality. You will start to forget things that other people will say to you, yeah, you did this, you went there, you like this, you like, and you're sitting there and going, I don't, what? And you don't remember. You clearly don't remember. And a lot of people back in the day, even now, would say, oh, you know, you might want to get that cognition checked out. Okay. No, because this is happening with everybody. When you start to disconnect from people, it's because your frequencies, just like the planets are splitting, you're splitting in your own tether way to the consciousness that remembers itself to be the body that you are. You are not the body. The body is attached to you in a consciousness way, and it is in and of itself a stream of consciousness that knows itself to be the body. But you're disconnecting. Like, you might be a little bit younger on this thing, but there used to be a scene when a spaceship, a rocket would shoot out of the stratosphere. That piece that got them to that higher level of the stratosphere disengages, and then it just floats away, and you see it in the video. You see it floating back to Earth and probably into the ocean. You start to disengage with your body. You start to have memory lapses, and what I would tell you is, don't freak out. Memory lapses are going to become a big part of the process of forgetting the storyline narratives. And in the lieu of that, you're going to start to remember the narrative of who you are. And so it's not like you just fall into this void and you go, you know, okay. No, that gets replaced with what you remember. And what you start to remember, again, I can't stress it enough, is that the people, places, and things that you always loved near and dear, that were always close to you or not, they're just a hologram. They're just a hologram. And with that becomes the remembrance that you have the capability with your we'll call them clairvoyant skills, to change your reality like a mystic would do. It becomes very mystical. You know, so I'll tell you just one real quick story. I know you know it, but just for the people that probably have never heard it, because I've never shared it, but since it is my last interview, I was hiking in an area that many people hike, and the cliffs weren't that big, but they were still big enough. Probably 30, 40 feet tall, and you slip and you fall, and well, you could pretty much kiss it goodbye. But I on this particular day, I happened to be going down one of these trails, and I rolled my ankle, and the next thing I know, I'm hanging on to these little tiny branches at the edge of the cliff, and it was easily a good 35 feet down, which, to put in perspective, it's like falling off of a 4-story building. Mm-hmm. Okay. And apparently, from what I was told, I levitated before I hit the ground. I had put on I have tattoos on my back, and there are wings, and I had to put those on before I went on this trip. And I believe I showed you, if I haven't, the blood that came out of those wings a week and a half, 2 weeks later, when I was finishing up my tattoo, but there were no signs of bruises. There was no signs of broken bones. There was no signs of anything. And I should have been, at the very least, really hospitalized. But instead, people say that just about 4 feet before I landed, I levitated. Take it for what it's worth, people. I'm just telling you the story. But that's how mystical your life starts to get, because you start to defy the nature of science as we know it in 3D. And that's a moment where, in some indirect way, I said, no, I must have, because it broke my fall, instead of breaking my back. So that's what I mean by how crazy that remembrance starts to get. And you'll just start to do things that you naturally wouldn't even know how to do, and you just do them. Whether it's vibrational thought or whether it's words that you're speaking, doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm sure that when I was falling, I was probably feeling into something that was going, no. and people were like, shit, man, you just fell from way up there. And I thought I fell like 5 feet. I really thought I fell like 5 feet. And they're like, look, you fell from way up there. And then you levitated. And I'm going, okay.
What's
take
next?
take it for what it's worth, people. But that's how magical it gets.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for sharing that story. I had heard it before, but every time you tell it, it's a different way. Given that this is your last interview, I wanted to give you the space to tell everyone here listening where they can still connect with you in other ways, maybe not in the interview way, but where people can connect with you in different ways. Where would you send people for that?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. I still have the initiate program or courses that I teach for the child, the way of the child, and it is meant to guide people to become master initiates, to become, if you will, and I mean this in a very humbling way, to become aware at the level which I am, because that's what's in that program is exactly what I went through. And so I still have that. And there are a number of other courses that I'm adding to it and labs and stuff so that people can really master their trait. And so I would love to see people come over there and check it out and hear the stories of, not my story, but hear the story of all the people who have gone through the program and how it has changed them. And for that, they can either go to I am my me. So it's IAM as in Mary, I am my me, myme.com, or they can go playground.imyme.com/quest. Okay. And they could go either one. And if you could put those in
we're going to link everything regardless.
Cool. And so what they could do there is see and ideally feel into whether or not they want to become a master initiate in this area. I mean, it's a very beautiful and playful and yet extraordinarily mystical area of consciousness. And if not, then at least they can continue to follow a lot of what I'm doing with my project, which is to expand global consciousness in a very rapid way with AI, and that will be something that I will be letting people sort of follow the quest that I'm going to be experiencing over the course of the next 6 to 9 months before that comes out sometime next summer.
Beautiful. And as you know, we end every episode with a segment called the Final Trio.
Dun, dun, dun.
Personalized questions to the guest. The first one I have for you is, what mystery or riddle have you stopped trying to solve?
Wow. Blah, 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 blah. Can we go to the second one? You stumped me on. I mean, there's so much there on that first one, because I feel I'll answer it this way, if you don't mind me kind of beating it a little bit around the bush. Since I was very little, with the stuff that happened with my near-death experience, with the stuff that happened in the hauntings of living in a very paranormal house. I mean, really paranormal. I've often wondered what if this was truly the nature of all reality. So I lived a good chunk of my childhood life just assuming that everybody went through this kind of stuff. And when I realized that it wasn't the case, then I started asking the question, what's the nature of reality? And I stopped searching for it when I realized I had never forgotten. I really never did. It was always in me, and I was always afraid to say it, which is everything that I've been talking about now, So I stopped searching for answers in terms of that, the nature of reality. And in part, when I did that, I stopped searching for the nature of my purpose here and for the nature of my relationship with the divine and all sorts of other questions that we have since the beginning of time, probably, and certainly at the beginning of our lives. we have been left wondering about, because things just haven't made sense to many of us. Even if they've made sense to most of us for a good chunk of our lives, they hit a point where they just realize, no, there's got to be more to this. So what I call, these are called the fundamental principle or questions of life or reality or the game. I stopped asking them when I realized that I had the answers all along. I was just too afraid to bring them out. And we all have those answers. Well, if I may, like that we are God. Well, if you're looking for your relationship with God and you're staring at God in the mirror, it changes things a lot. And so, yeah, it's kind of a domino effect of a number of things that I've stopped pursuing.
Beautiful. Powerful. Before you incarnated into this physical realm, what instructions did the angelic realm give you that still reflect the work that you're doing today?
And this one is actually a bit, I may or may not get emotional about this, but what I came to realize, through that very question about instructions, was that we have no earthly idea how much love went into creating this game for you. The love that everybody had to have in order to play the roles that they played in your life, and many of them were not pleasant. The love that came into play with all of the hardship and the fear and the hatred and let's call it evil out there. The love that was involved in putting this together for you is indescribable. And you say, well, wait, what do you mean? I mean, why would they create out of love all of this stuff? We don't understand that to play in this game, if they're just participating in your game, these divine beings had to really, they wanted to be part of this because it's a hell of an experience, but they had to really love you to play the villain in your game, to suffer for you to remember that this must not be the end all be all of your game. So much love is involved in putting together a game like this. It is when you taste it, and I've been fortunate enough to have tasted it in my near-death experience and in subsequent experiences of channeling. It's like take a little speckle of sand, how tiny it is, and you put it on the tip of your tongue. It blows up your tongue with such enormity of love. It makes you literally fall on your knees and cry because of how beautiful the love was that came into play to make this possible for you to play the game of remembering who you are. And that was something that it was told to me early on, to never forget that. No matter how the circumstances might be in my life and in other people's lives, and it can be pretty bad, never forget the enormity of the love that came into play in order to create this game, just so that you could play the game of forgetfulness and remembrance. So that was it.
And through the last few years, you've shared many spiritual teachings and mystical messages online, through interviews, through podcasts. If this was truly your last one, what is one thing that you would like to tell your future self, the one that will be looking back at this experience and, you sharing these crazy messages to people and to the public? And what would you like to tell your future self right now?
What I would like to tell my future self, or my future self tell me?
What would you like to tell your future self? Because I know you're going to watch this back in another moment.
Oh, I see. Okay, I get you. Funny enough, because I've actually have experienced this in some ways already. Okay. I'm not sure if you can delete this piece out, so I'm just going to try to PG it. I would say, what took you effing long? What took you effing long? It's about time that that to see how simple this was. It was really simple if you had just given yourself a chance to get out of your own way. You did it, and you did something that very few have ever done in the course of this Earth School. But you did it so hard. You didn't have to do it that way. It was never meant for you to do it that way. But you're here. So welcome back. You know, but my God, you didn't have to do it this hard. And that would be, in a sense, what my message has always been to people. The initiation process, Emilio, if I may kind of digress a little bit, it's a beautiful process of remembering, but it also, to remember your divinity is something that we fight it all the way to the end. And it takes a lot of energy to help you remember that you are who you are. And oftentimes that translates into literally getting yourself in situations where you are physically drained and other things. It never had to be that way. It still doesn't have to be that way. But you did it. Yay. You did it. But you didn't have to do it this hard. And so that's what I would say to my future self. And then I would say, now that you know, let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah,
wow.
That's what I would say.
This is actually our 6th conversation in this format, probably like 15th in the span of, you know, the moments we've shared together.
Yeah.
But I can truly say that you've helped me see an aspect of myself that no one else has allowed me to see. And every time I'm with you, I remember that essence, that thread of who I am. And it's been my biggest honor holding space for you. I know this isn't the end of our collaborations together. I know I will convince Franco to come back on the show. And for those that want that, let's go in the comments. Let's go and come back.
Thank you.
But I just wanted to just acknowledge you for the greatness that you embody, for the wisdom that you hold, for the codes that you hold for the future generations to come. And I'm just super, super happy for you in the next chapter that you're building. And always, in whatever way I can serve you and support you, myself and this whole community is here with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been, I'm very touched by that. You and I have developed a wonderful friendship, and it's, as I told you before we got on, it's just the beginning of other things that we will be doing. But it touches me to know that I had that kind of input or impact on you and for those who have listened to you religiously over the years. So thank you for having me on. And I'll kind of say it this way. I'll never forget the experience in the event that it is my last time. But I know that there will be other ways that we will be communicating with each other in the future. Okay.
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Let's go.
Let's go. Come on now. Let's go.